Welcome back, minors. My name is Tracy Kriegel. I'm a counselor here in Student Wellbeing.
Hi, and my name is Amber Johnston. I'm also a counselor at Student Wellbeing, and it's time for your morning cup of joe. So this episode is going to be a little bit controversial.
Ooh.
Well, as controversial as your standard psychoeducational podcast about mental health topics using pop culture can be, but it's going to be a little bit more controversial because we are going to weigh in on Gilmore Girls and the whole Jess, Dean, Logan debate today. So we're not really going to be talking about taking a side on which of those would be the best partner for the main character, but this week we're going to be kind of giving a little bit of insight into one of the characters, and that may or may not influence your beliefs about the show.
Gotcha.
So, are you familiar at all with Gilmore Girls?
A little bit, but it's been a long time since I watched the show.
Well, Gilmore Girls is a show that went off the air, for those of you who aren't familiar, it went off the air in 2008, and there was a short revival, 4 episodes, they were like an hour long apiece in 2016. But other than that, it's kind of got a cult following. It's extremely popular on Netflix still to this day, and it remains pretty culturally relevant. The show, for those of you who have never heard of it, is about a mother who, when she was a teenage mom, and she had a daughter when she was 16, and she ran away from home and moved to a small town in Connecticut and raised her daughter in this small town as a single mom. And so when the show starts, the daughter is the same age that the mother was when she became a teen mom. And it kind of goes through, both of them have the dating life, the daughter kind of trying to forge her own way through high school and college, and it's the show is about people that are flawed. Like that's basically the premise of it. This is not none of the characters in the show are aspirational in any way. We'll say that like right off the bat. They all struggle, and they all have their own flaws and good points and bad points, and they have depth to them. And I think that's why the show attracts so many people to it.
Sure. That makes sense.
So, and that and the focus of the show on relationships and how those kind of develop. And so there is, again, we are, how many years? It's been well over a decade since the show ended, and people still very adamantly debate who the daughter should have ended up with.
They wanted to be able to say, "Ooh, you should be here with him. Oh no, this one's the best one for you."
Yes, yes, and they get very, very upset and very passionate about it. So, like I said, we're not going to weigh in on that at all. But what we're going to talk about is one of those main boyfriends named Jess Mariano, and adverse childhood experiences, or what we will call in this ACEs. So ACEs, you want to weigh in, Tracy, on what ACEs are?
Yeah, I mean, I do have experience with that, even though I don't have a lot of experiences with the Gilmore Girls. So ACEs are actually adverse childhood experiences. They're events that happen during our childhood that cause us to experience trauma. So a lot of us throughout our lifetimes have experienced trauma. Unfortunately, most of us have experienced at least one ACE. And up to 1/6 of us have experienced 4 or more ACEs throughout our lifetime. So these ACEs are, examples of ACEs are neglect, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, domestic violence, substance abuse in the home, mental health problems in the home, parents serving prison time, parents separating or divorce, loss of a loved one, bullying, which is all too common in America, especially in, I know, my hometown it was, poverty, experiencing or witnessing a violence.
Right. And the more, and most of us have at least one ACE in our childhood. The more ACEs we have, the higher we are for risk of adverse mental health outcomes and even physical health outcomes because of having those ACEs. So ACEs negatively impact our mental health and physical health in a variety of ways. Like, we can have difficulty forming close relationships with other people. We can have trouble keeping a job. We can have difficulty with our finances. It can result in us having unpredictable spending habits or impulsive spending habits. We can have depression. We can have depressive symptoms. We can be more likely to be involved in violence, or you may have that kind of trope of the troubled youth constantly getting in fights, kind of is, and the reason that's a trope is a thing is because of ACEs.
Sure.
You can experience early unwanted pregnancies, so young pregnancy is a higher likelihood for those who have ACEs. They're more likely to be incarcerated at some point in their life. They're also more likely to be unemployed or experience long periods of unemployment. They're also more likely to expose their children to ACEs. Trauma has a tendency to be passed on. And it's also more likely for them to have alcohol or substance abuse problems as they get older. And they can have higher risks of attempting suicide, and higher risk of health problems such as heart disease, cancer, lung disease, and liver disease. And that all has to do because even though our brain, we don't think of trauma directly affecting our health, but when we have trauma, the stress and the mental health concerns, anxiety, depression can all affect our endocrine system. So it can cause us to have increased blood pressure, increased cholesterol, increased blood sugar. It can cause all these problems that then lead to long-term health consequences that actually make us have shorter lives and cause massive problems.
Right. And I think I want to reinforce what we're saying. It doesn't mean if you've had one ACE that you're going to do all these things.
No.
It just means that if you have had an adverse childhood experience, that you could possibly experience one of these things.
Yes.
And so I think it's just important for us to bring this information to the table today to let people be aware that if you've experienced an adverse childhood trauma, these are things that you could be experiencing, or if you've experienced one of these things, this is part of adverse childhood trauma.
Yes.
And so if you're experiencing depression, just know that having adverse childhood trauma could be a portion of that.
Yes.
And so that's very important for you to kind of know, that it's not that something's wrong with me because I have depression. I think it's important for us to know that, situations happen, and I think it's just parts of who we are.
Yes.
And these are things that they're triggers. And so there's actually a actual screening that can be done in adverse childhood trauma screening, that kind of pinpoint those things that, professionals do, and so that's part of recognizing what an ACE is. So I wanted to just kind of clarify that. So if somebody's listening to this and they go, oh my goodness, I have all these things wrong with me,
Right.
I just want to let you know that when you're listening to this, you don't go, well, there must be something really wrong with me. There's not. It's just these are things that could be, a portion of, an indication that, that you've had a trauma, and it doesn't mean you're going to have depression.
No.
It doesn't mean that you're going to have cardiovascular disease. It just could be a trigger for something that may happen, for someone who's had an adverse childhood trauma.
Well, it could put you, especially the more you have. Again, most people have one. Like, most people have at least one of these adverse child experiences. But when we start getting into the higher numbers, where you've got people who've got, 20,
right.
You've got people that have got 50 that experienced or more, where they've had multiple instances of violence, or maybe they were abused regularly as a child, or there was a severe emotional neglect, and we start adding those up there, and you start getting more and more and more. Right. What ends up happening is that it causes an increase of likelihood of these symptoms. So it's not an immediately, my parents got divorced and now I'm going to have heart disease. Right. Like, it doesn't work that way. Right. It's more as these increase, it is increasingly likely that these could happen. Right. However, having these experiences isn't an end, like this is going to happen, even no matter how many you have. Right. You can recover from ACEs, and you can work through that trauma and come out on the other side. It's the purpose is to make you aware that this can happen in a way that you can protect yourself, and you can come out and say, okay, well, I need some help working through this trauma so that I can process it and put myself in a better space, so I'm less likely to have depression, so I'm less likely to experience health concerns and adverse outcomes.
And I think that's the key, Amber. I think that's exactly, what we would want all of our students, what anyone who's listening to this, even if you're not a student, you might be an adult sitting at home, over in Indonesia or wherever you are, you don't have to be isolated because of something that's happened to you.
No.
There is always help for you, and I think speaking up and asking for help is the key.
Right. And working with individuals who have substance use, because I've done a lot of work with individuals with substance use, ACEs are one of the primary things that we find in individuals with substance use problems. And so, like, that's part of the recovery process, is locating those ACEs and helping them process that trauma. Because again, these are common themes, and the same thing with individuals who are within the prison system and things like that. Like, a lot of times you see these themes that are going through their lives.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that key is, we bring this to the table. It's recognizing what's happened, and then it's what's that next step.
Yes.
Yeah, what's the next step? And here's that next step for people. So,
right.
So, yeah. So tell me more about what happened in Gilmore Girls. I'm just
with
dying to know.
Okay.
I'm dying to know.
So Jess is he's a 16-year-old boy, and his mother has an addiction. She's addicted to drugs, and so his dad ran out on him when he was very, very young, and his mom was constantly bringing in new boyfriends, and like I said, there was drug use and alcoholism and neglect and things. And so he comes from he's from New York, and he comes to this little small town in Connecticut, and immediately, as soon as you meet him, he's got this giant chip on his shoulder, like, immediately. Like, he is snarky and sarcastic and just demeaning. The way he talks to everyone around him is just demeaning. And his mom sent him there because she can't control him anymore. Like, he is acting out, he is behaving in ways like he's skipping school, like he's not doing the things he's supposed to do. So she sends him to live with her brother, who is he is one of the main characters of the show. And so we don't see a whole lot. This show is very much a family show, so we're not going to see a whole lot of real delinquency out of Jess in the show. Like, he does a couple pranks, like he makes a chalk outline out front of the market. They have a little grocery store. It's not even like a real big grocery store. It's just kind of like it's tiny. It's tiny. And so he makes a chalk outline like somebody had been murdered.
Oh, gosh.
And then put up caution tape around it. So everybody's like trying to figure out what's going on. And like the one police officer in town is like completely confused. He caused total chaos with this. And he's just sitting back watching this all unfold, because this is the kind of town where everybody knows everybody else. And they had to go take an account of all the citizens to make sure everybody was okay.
Gosh,
and
that's
like the whole 9 yards. And he takes one of the other citizens, he takes her garden gnome, like he steals her garden gnome, and she's devastated because she's named the garden gnome.
Mr. Gnomey's gone.
It's Peepon.
Oh,
She stole Peepon. He stole Peepon and hid him in the closet, and so like it's caused chaos with this. And I'm trying to remember some of the other things he does. He just does these little bitty pranks, and like, so when we think of juvenile delinquency, we don't really think of somebody making a chalk outline of a local market. He does smoke, but that's about the most risque thing he does. Right. There's some drinking. Like I think he drinks like one beer.
wow.
Again,
that's over the edge.
family show, very, very G-rated. But mostly what we see from him is just attitude and disrespect for authority. So he's got contempt towards everyone. The first thing he does is basically grab his book and then go and he gets in, lays down his bags, grabs a book because he's very literary. He likes to read. I joke all the time that he reminds me of Holden Caulfield out of Catcher in the Rye.
Gotcha.
So he grabs his book and heads out to get away from everything. And he's very pessimistic. He's got no friends. He doesn't like anyone or anything except for the daughter. He meets her and he likes her immediately. They're both very bookish people. She's on the other side. Like it's very contrasted because she attends an elite private school and she's headed towards going to an Ivy League. She's like actually looking at going to Harvard. She is going to a private school with the very competitive type environment, like very, very, very well exceeding grades and all that kind of thing. Very gifted. And so she's got a boyfriend. And so he starts setting himself up against this boyfriend that she has at the time and starts basically mocking the boyfriend every time he's around him. Which then, of course, makes the boyfriend mad. So then we have that whole dynamic. And he's like a foot shorter. Like, I mean, there's like a massive height difference there. But they get into fights a lot. Like, it's crazy. And he's rude. So to everyone. And then, so finally, she ends up breaking up with her boyfriend and she hooks up with him. And when she hooks up with him, you think everything's going to be great now, right? Because now he's got the girl and it's all going to be great. But it's not. Instead, he becomes rude and dismissive to her.
Oh.
So why he doesn't return her calls, he fails to make plans, he doesn't follow through on his plans, and when he's angry, what does he do? He just shuts down and he just becomes passive aggressive with her and he won't talk to her, and he does this thing called stonewalling. And I think we've talked about in the podcast stonewalling before, but if you've missed that or if you need a review, basically stonewalling is when we refuse to talk about something that's bothering us. So it's like if I ask Tracy what's wrong and Tracy goes, nothing, I'm fine.
Just shutting it out.
Yes, it's shutting that other person out. And all of these tactics here are emotionally abusive tactics. And what's worse is that he, like, the whole town immediately, like, decided they didn't like him as soon as he comes in. So, and not that the pranks made anything any better for him, but they just basically, because he comes in wearing this leather jacket with this tough boy attitude, and he's out of town, and he's not, he doesn't have that wholesome air like the daughter does, Rory. Like, immediately they just don't like him. And the adults let him down. Nobody got him any therapy for his ACEs. Nobody got him any help, and he just gets swept under the rug, which is terrible. Terrible.
Yeah.
He's let down by everyone, and it only reinforces his anger. It reinforces his view of the fact that people let you down. And it becomes especially directed at the people who have no intention of trying to help him, and it becomes directed at Rory. So he's very, like, rude to her. So why is this teenage boy so mean to the people who are trying to help him? His uncle, Rory, like, the people who step in and try to help him. Well, in short, it's because he never learned how to have a proper, normal relationship. He doesn't know how to be in a relationship. Remember when we talked about the ACEs? And it making us more likely to abuse other people? This is what this is, because he hasn't learned how to care about somebody else. He doesn't know what that looks like, and it probably feels incredibly uncomfortable to him. And then he gets let down by the town, by school, by all the adults in his life, and he's left in pain, and he's hurt, and as a result, he just kind of lashes out and hurts everyone else around him, because that's the only thing he can do. He doesn't know how to do anything else. He's got all this pain inside him, and he's just lashing out because he's hurting. And this is what can happen when we're struggling with trauma, is we hurt people that didn't injure us, and hurt the people that are trying to help us and the people that love us. And so we need to be careful that our compassion doesn't trick us into allowing somebody that's hurt to hurt us because they're hurting.
Right.
We have to keep our boundaries strong and say, okay, I understand you're hurting, but that doesn't give you the right to treat me this way.
Right.
And that's a huge one, because we want to, like, here's this person is hurting, I want to help them.
Yeah.
And then we allow ourselves to get hurt in the process. But at the same time, we also have to understand that a lot of that lashing out is not personal. It's this person is flailing and in pain. So it's that balance.
It is a balance.
Wouldn't you agree?
It is. And, I've worked with a lot of adolescents that have been in, some pretty serious situations, and it's hard for them to understand, like you were mentioning, what was his name? Rory?
Her,
yeah. And so getting them to understand, what's my responsibility in the actions of my behavior, and then when you help them connect the dots to the trauma, it's almost like a light bulb goes on of, I was hurt, but yet I'm hurting out of my hurt.
Yes.
And the light bulb goes on to, I went through trauma, so I was traumatized, but yet I'm lashing out because of my trauma. And when the light bulb goes on, it's very enlightening for them to understand that, because I was traumatized, that trauma I'm inflicting on other people, because no one ever loved me, really.
Right.
And I don't know how to love other people.
Right.
And so within that, if I could just figure out myself, maybe I can not hurt other people, because it hurts too much to allow people to love me, because I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt again.
Well, and I don't feel like I'm worthy of love, because I don't feel like there's been nobody who's shown me love thus far. So I've learned that I'm not worthy to be loved.
Right.
Therefore, when you give me love, I don't know how to take it, because I'm afraid the rug's going to be pulled out from under me.
Right. There's so much that goes within trauma, and that's that piece that you have to. That's where counseling and therapy. That's where recognizing that treatment is necessary, and so this is where, when ACEs occur, Not always can we do self-treatment. Not always is self-help,
Yes.
the route that we can go, and when we recognize that, I have an issue,
Right.
and this is, for some people, we don't ever recognize that we have an issue, and when we see prison and legal issues happening, it gets forced upon them. But if we recognize just trauma starting to affect us, if we're having a relationship problem or depression is happening, and we're getting triggered by how other people are treating us, don't be afraid to say, I need some help. So, and if you're recognizing that, maybe your mom and dad says something to you and it just doesn't feel good, and you're recognizing you're getting angry inside of you, or maybe you were experienced bullying when you were in high school, and now you're experiencing some of those same thoughts and feelings because of your peers just don't accept you or something, just acknowledge that, hey, I have trauma here and I need to talk to somebody about this.
Right.
We at Student Wellbeing, we can have an appointment with you, or if you don't live on this campus and you're listening to this podcast because you reside somewhere else, don't be afraid to reach out for assistance.
Right.
There are people who can help you. There's counselors, there's safe, BetterHelp, there's Talkspace, there are places that you can go for help, and that's why, we do exist, for
Right.
assistance. And so if you need to talk to somebody, that's why we're here. So
Well, and there's a variety of different treatment methods for talk therapy as far as trauma goes, and then there's other types of therapy that have nothing to do with talking, like your creative arts therapies and your EMDR and TFCBT, and you have all of these other things that fit into this that allow different treatment methods in order to process that trauma. There's even equine therapy where people use
Yes.
horses and
Yes.
and I know there's some with other animals too,
Yes.
that work with, and there's music therapy and
Yes.
and all of these just different modalities to help process trauma. So it's not a one size fits all stereotypical box, where we think of, like Freud and the backwards couch.
No.
Like, it doesn't always look like that.
Right.
And so going in and talking to somebody and finding out what options are available and what can be done, you might be surprised at what people can do to kind of help you get through this and work through some of your feelings.
Right.
We have some groups on campus for those of you who maybe have, like, we're not to the level of having 20 ACEs. Maybe we've got one or two, and we just kind of need to learn some of those skills. Then we have like a grit and resilience class, and we've got the creative arts processing. We'll be doing that this semester. We'll also we do have the talk therapy like Tracy was talking about, but you can come up here and we'll get you screened and we'll talk about the different options and what would work best for you and your situation, and see if we can't get you lined out. We can be compassionate towards individuals, whether it be ourselves or whether it be somebody else that have ACEs in their past, but the important part to remember, and one of the other pieces I wanted to emphasize for those who maybe they don't have a whole lot of ACEs themselves, but maybe have a family member or somebody else that does, is to remember to maintain those boundaries and not allow our compassion to allow us to be traumatized ourselves. We can have a help. For that piece of it, for the boundary piece, we have a healthy relationships group. You are more than welcome to run, to come and see, and we'll talk about boundaries and how to establish those healthy boundaries in communication and keep that in a safe area.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I just think that everybody who's here on campus just know that we want you to feel comfortable, and know that this is a safe space. We have the Minor Oasis. If you just need a place to come and have a quiet space, it's there. There's a wonderful, beautiful massage chair
Yes.
that you can come and just veg out in, and just relax. We have a Zen Den that's a quiet space if you just need a quiet, comfy spot to just relax, to, just need a quiet space to just find a comfortable place during the hours that we're here. We're here Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 if you need to reach out to us. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time.
For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com. You can also add and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using our handle at S&T Wellbeing.